Alrighty, Marvin, you can intro us in, and we can get everybody to start their intros, and we can start from there.
Yeah, sure. I will give a very brief intro to what we're going to be talking about today. Uh, okay, awesome. Thanks, Anna. Yeah, so this is the Buck Institute graduate panel. I know a lot of people are applying for graduate school very soon, and I know the PhD program is not something running, but the master's program is. But I figured, hey, if you're applying for some aging grad program, who better to talk to than a bunch of people at the Buck who have probably applied for all these positions before and were probably in the same position as you were, maybe a few years ago. So I'm really happy to have all the great people today. A lot of them I've met only recently. Ariel and Sid I met because I'm going to the Buck for a postback, and they were really helpful helping me set stuff up. Francesco I met a while back before, who I think at like an age one event. He was like the first person who probably talked to me at some point when we were sitting down. And Anna I met at Longevity Summit a long time ago, where I was just lost looking for grad school advice, and she was like one of the only people who came up and talked to me. So I trust these people with my life. They are super awesome, super nice. And I'm really excited to have them here today. So format wise, we'll have them all do maybe a 1 to 2 minute intro. Afterwards, the LongX group here will have a few questions to ask, really basic, and then probably after 20 minutes, we'll open the floor up to everyone else, so you can hit them with all your questions that you want. So without further ado, why don't we do intros? I guess we'll start with Ariel and sort of go out from there.
Thanks for having us, and I hope this is helpful for everybody today. Yeah, so my name is Ariel. I'm going into my fourth year of my PhD, and I am in the Verdin Lab at the Buck Institute. And we study human immune aging in the lab, and I'm looking at ketone bodies, which are a metabolite that are induced by fasting or a ketogenic diet, and looking at their interaction with aging in the immune system. And the way that I got into aging is I've always been super active and really interested in healthy living. I was really competitive in wrestling and martial arts. So kind of tying that to science is, why is it that we're told to eat healthy and exercise for a long life? So that's what led me to the Buck Institute.
I guess best things to do, we'll just go in order of the screenshot or the graphic that Super has up on screen. So Sid, how about you go next?
Great. Yeah, I'm Sid. I'm a fifth year PhD student. So I'll hopefully be finishing up in the next 6 or 8 months. So I work in John Newman's lab. So half of our lab runs the clinical trials at the Buck Institute using ketone esters, which are precursor molecules of ketone bodies like Ariel was talking about. And then the other half of our lab is doing basic science. And so that's where I work. And so I look at how ketone bodies and other small molecule metabolites can regulate the solubility of proteins. So I started looking at the brain using Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative diseases kind of as a context for that project. And then now I'm looking at gut and gut barrier integrity kind of as a follow-up. Yeah, and so I got interested in aging mostly through neurodegenerative disease and kind of my interest in diet and exercise. And so I was just so interested, like, how can we eat all these different things? Like, how can you eat only Twinkies for a full day and still live? Like, how does that make any sense when like some people are vegan, some people are, complete carnivores, some people like live longer than others? How does it make sense that like we can have access to all these different nutrients and things, and it can have such a huge effect on our lifespan? And some people develop diseases like diabetes, some people don't. So that was really like what kind of pushed me into aging.
Thanks, Sid. And by the way, if you guys are ever in like the Bay Area / Marin Sonoma, I think Sid is like somehow he knows the place like the back of his hand. So if you need not only research advice but direction advice, he literally has the place painted. Like he could give you every tree, every boulder in the place. So there's extra details for you there. Francesco, why don't you go next on your research?
Yeah, hi guys. So yeah, my name is Francesco. I actually just finished the PhD program at the Buck. So I'm, just got my PhD, but I used to be in Judith Campisi's lab, and I used to do, senescence research there. So a lot of cell culture, lots of imaging, all that stuff. And the reason why I got interested in aging was actually, yeah, because I was chatting with my immunology professor at the time, and he talked to me about these senescent cells and how people were already developing compounds to eliminate the senescent cells to try and improve the lifespan in mice. And, the idea is to eventually do it in people. So I got interested in aging and longevity basically, not as much because of, different diets and lifestyle, but because it sounded like even at the time when I was joining PhD program, there were already people that were trying to develop actual drugs, actual interventions for longevity. And that's what really got me interested, because that is what I wanted to do. I wanted to get into biotech, get into drug development. And the idea of developing a drug for aging was something that just like blew my mind. And that's why I decided to join the buck.
Awesome. And Francesco, I see you have the neuroage in brackets here. Have you moved on and found more stuff since graduating?
I got a position. I just got a position as a scientist at a aging biotech startup in the Bay that's called NeuroAge. And the company, is trying to develop drugs to basically ameliorate or potentially cure neurodegenerative diseases. So still working on aging.
Okay, awesome. Well, great to have you in the field. I'm sure, Francesco has a lot of questions. I remember he was like the guy when I was talking to him. He is the senescence junkie. So as a senescence researcher, had a lot of questions for him at some point. And, last but not least, I know not everyone is going to be doing a PhD program necessarily, but I had wind that Dominican had some partnership with the Buck and they had some sort of master's program in place. So I'm very happy to have Ana here today. And how about, Ana, you introduce yourself and a bit about your research as well?
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Ana. I did the Dominican Master Program. I recently graduated in May, so I started in fall of 2022. It was a 2-year program, but how I stumbled upon is I was looking for a career change. So my path isn't linear. It was very all over the place, but I really wanted to do research just because COVID took away my possibilities of doing research as an undergrad. So then when I graduated, I was trying to find new ways of doing research. So then I stumbled upon the Dominican Master Program, which is actually paid by the Buck. So that was a very intriguing to me. But what really caught my attention is I was in Dr. Christopher Benz's lab. So he's the only lab at the Buck that focuses on breast cancer, which was very intriguing to me since he is a medical oncologist as well. So my research in the Benz lab was looking at a new ERB2 positive breast cancer treatment option for patients. So I was looking at the RNA exosome and seeing how it degrades the ERB2 mRNA. So it's a new therapeutic approach. So that was very exciting. And now I'm working for a biotech startup at the Buck. So I'm still at the Buck, but not necessarily with the Buck. So that's a little bit about myself.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Ana. Sounds like if you're at the Buck, somehow they keep you around, even after you graduated sometimes. Yeah, once again, I think Denise has said, in the chat, if you guys have questions you want us to ask at some point, we'll just keep a tally of them in the chat and we'll ask them after we ask our very basic preliminary ones, which I think everyone will ask. I guess I don't know what to ask first. The first thing I was thinking about was maybe how research is different as a graduate student than undergrad. I think in undergrad, all our projects, the first thing is all of them are pretty short. But I'm curious how you compare the experience of doing a bigger project over, whether it's 1, 2, 4, or 5 years versus what you may have had in undergrad. And I don't know if anyone wants to answer first, or I can call on someone, but I'll leave the floor open for now.
I can talk a little bit about that, or at least like my experience. So I came straight from undergrad. I did my undergrad at Virginia Tech. I majored in neuroscience, and so there I worked for about 1.5 years in a pharmacology lab within the Department of Neuroscience, and then for about 2.5 years, does that add up to 4? Whatever. And biochemistry lab, and that was basically like purifying protein. So, I mean, I would say that the scope of the work is really different, and I think one of the things that I thought was like really great advice when I came to grad school that I got from current grad students was to find a PI that was going to help design a project that gave you basically like one safe project that you know that you're going to get a paper from and it's going to help you graduate, and then gives you like another project that's exploratory. And I think that's like kind of been my experience. And so the scope of even the safe project is something that either you're going to take on completely independently or you're going to have very limited support. So it's going to be something where you're learning how to create all of the or develop all of the like critical thinking skills that are really going to help you become independent as a postdoc or as a scientist. And so I think like the emphasis is that the PhD is a doctorate of philosophy and it's not a doctorate of science. And so while you're learning all of these scientific techniques, it's really important to learn how to interrogate questions and develop solutions to problems. And so the scope of the projects that you work on really reflect that. So they're a lot larger. They might take a lot longer to come up with. Even just like a lot of PhD students, I think, typically spend the first summer after their rotations. So the first year being typically a year where you spend doing rotations unless you're a direct admit. And so after that first year, they might spend like that whole summer or a good month or so just reading papers, kind of going back and forth with their PI to come up with a project. And so, I mean, as an undergrad, you're really just kind of filling roles. You're learning how to be in the lab for the first time. You're learning how to maybe start to do things slightly independently. But then as a first year grad student, even you should be able to work independently in the lab and really solve and troubleshoot problems. And so that's been my experience, at least.
Thanks for sharing your experience. And I also had a question a bit more specific about the Buck Institute as a whole, because doing how is grad school there compared to other places, or doing research in general at the Buck? What are some pros and cons of doing it at the Buck specifically, in terms of funding, location, types of projects, or anything else that you guys may have in mind? Maybe if somebody else wants to take that.
I mean, the biggest thing is that it's a research institute and not at a university, and so that's kind of the main difference. I would say that's like different than going to like a university or being an undergrad. Is like there's no undergrads here unless they might be here for the summer. So us like being the graduate students are kind of the babies, and I feel like we kind of could get more attention in that way. There's some help in that, like on the other hand of that, that means that there's not really as many mentorship opportunities in certain aspects. And so I think some of the groups here have been really passionate about that though, and have been able to like outreach and figure out how to get some other mentorship opportunities. Just it's a lot smaller. Everybody kind of knows everybody and sees everybody around. That's really the main difference that I feel from going to like a university.
Oh, and I guess just give everyone a chance to talk. I'm not trying to pick on you, Francesco, but because Sid said you went from undergrad right into doing the graduate school right away. I know when we had a conversation, you were in undergrad, but then you went to the PC lab, not doing the graduate school right away. Was there a big difference for you doing the undergrad, working in the PC lab, and then doing the graduate school in terms of responsibility?
Yeah, I guess that my background is different, right? Because I'm an immigrant, and so I did both my undergrad and my master's back home in Italy. And I think that a great way for people who are interested in doing their PhD in the States, and at the moment, they're not in the States, is to try and get an internship with one of the labs that you're interested in, because that's what I did, and it definitely worked out for me. So as I was wrapping up my master's, like the way that masters are set up in Europe is that, or at least in Italy, is that you do lots of classes in like zero science for about a year and a half, and then you do an extra year of only research. And so in order to do that, you need to find a place where you want to do this like 6 months to 1 year long internship, and I did it in the Campisi lab. And like people typically are happy to take free labor, right? So you as an intern have like a decent chance of getting into a lab, and if as long as they don't have to pay for you. And so if that's something that you know can afford, because honestly, it's not, you know, you need to have a little bit of money squirreled away. Maybe you need to get some help from your parents, but that's something that I would highly recommend to do if you can. Because then I was able to get into the PhD program, and I was one of those direct admit that Sid was talking about earlier. So I didn't do any rotations. I got straight into the PhD program by joining the Campisi lab. So if you guys already know who you want to work for, so if you're rather interested in working for like somebody specific rather than joining a program, I would highly, highly recommend to do an internship in that person's lab. And that way you're way more likely to be selected for, you know, the PhD program they're in, but also from the lab, because the lab is going to have to select people out of all of the PhD students that are rotating. And maybe you can just bypass the whole thing by having them like you during the internship.
Awesome, Francesco. Yeah, and obviously they really like Francesco. He has now 4 or 5 years gone, and he's finished his program. So you know that's awesome that I made it through. And I guess Anna, I know we asked 2 questions right now. I'm curious from your experience. I know probably Sid, Ariel, Francesco will ask about the first year, what it was like in terms of, I know some PhD programs are the rotational ones through different labs, some are just the direct entry. But for you, Anna, I know you said undergrad was a little bit like hectic. You know, during COVID era, how much research are you really going to be able to do? I'm curious what the master's was like for you in terms of what that experience was like at the Buck. Was there any reason you picked the Buck, whether it's funding or types of projects, the community or support? What was it like in that case?
Yeah, so for me, it was 2 years was really fast. Unfortunately, you don't get to see the whole project through, but I think it's a really great snippet. I think if in that time frame, it's full-time research, so they already have a set up project just because it's a 2 year, so they want to make sure that it can be done in 2 years. But in my opinion, it was kind of more of a job, I would say, because yeah, it's full-time, and then from the start I was working on my thesis, so that was very interesting, but very efficient, just because at the end I had to submit a thesis, and that really helped out for jobs, just because I had to present it and stuff like that, and potentially for grad school in the future. I am thinking about applying for a PhD, not this cycle, but next cycle. But what I really like about the Buck is, well, when I first interviewed with Dr. Benz, I really liked his energy, and he was very recognized, and I could tell that he would be a good mentor. So I really honed into that. So that's why I decided to join Dr. Christopher Benz's lab. And also the project was really interesting to me. Since I was going to work 2 years on a project, I decided to work on something that really that I cared about, which is breast cancer. And I think overall my experience at the Buck has been very beneficial. You get to meet graduate students, postdocs, postbacs, senior scientists, so everyone from all over, and we also have seminars. So I got to learn about like senescence, although my lab doesn't talk about like senescence or Alzheimer's. I still got to understand and get a glimpse of what other age-related diseases are.
Thanks, Anna. And by the way, I know I'm gonna I'll probably hand it off to the since you're in a sec, because I think Ariel, Francesco, Sid, and all know that I will talk your ear off if I'm given free reign. So I don't know, maybe Sidharth, do you want to ask the next question about maybe what other programs they're thinking about in that case?
Yeah, no, for sure. So, I mean, I'm sure a lot of students can relate to this, but when it comes to graduate school, it's very overwhelming. You know, there's a plethora of places to choose from. And if you know what you want to do, it does, I guess, bring down the niche a little bit more, so a little bit easier to select. So for you guys specifically, like what were some other schools or programs you were considering other than Buck when you're when you're essentially first considering graduate school. And for the PhD candidates specifically, are there any programs you'd recommend checking out based off of your original search, or maybe now that you've learned much more about graduate school? I guess we can start off with Ariel and just work our way through the list.
Yeah, it's really funny because I got accepted to this program and the UC Berkeley Metabolic Bio program, which we still interact with a lot and are at the Bay Area aging meeting. So like either way, I was going to be in this field up here. But I was looking because I had done immunology research in undergrad and was really interested in that. I was looking for programs that maybe were in immunology and had some metabolism focus or maybe some aging focus, but really like the UC Berkeley Metabolic Bio program and the aging program, of course, were like the two ones that really had the aging component in there. I had also applied to like the Mayo Clinic because they have some labs that are a little bit focused in aging. But yeah, the other programs I looked at were really just immunology focused and didn't really have so much of the aging component just because it's not really, yeah, so much of a deal.
Yeah, I applied to maybe about 10 programs, including like Rockefeller's and Mount Sinai and like Stanford, Berkeley, and Washington. But I applied mostly to like neuroscience focused programs. I think looking back now, that I would kind of change that. So I like the Mayo Clinic program. I think if I were to like go back, I would probably have applied for that. I just think it's my focus really was to find somewhere where I could separate myself from and like make a big transition from being an undergrad. And so I liked a lot of these kind of like smaller programs, like at Rockefeller, where it's like a specific institution. It doesn't have an undergrad population, like at Buck, UCSF, same kind of deal. Mount Sinai. And then I think it was like really important to me also to find somewhere where I would have exposure to like MDs and kind of like the translational component. And so like my PI, John Newman, he's a MD PhD. He still is a practicing geriatrician. And then, like I said, part of our lab runs the clinical trials now. And so I think that was like an important thing to me, kind of like how Francesco was saying, like the way that aging and longevity is going is towards moving everything into humans. And so I think it's really exciting, and you're kind of like holding yourself back if you're not like kind of involved in something that's a little more translational. But I think a lot of the labs here at Buck are kind of moving in that direction due to Eric Verdin being the CEO and really kind of trying to push that. Some other programs I feel like I wish I had kind of considered a little more were maybe like Vanderbilt, and then like Duke and UNC both have good programs. I mean, I think a big thing to kind of consider is like what kind of like culture and environment do you want to have? And so like finding somewhere where like the size is appropriate is important. And part of like us being the PhD students being through USC is if we had decided to stay at USC, we could have either been at the main campus or we could have been at the health science campus. And so there's like a little bit of like differentiation there too. So like the same thing if you decide like, oh, I want to apply to UCSD San Diego's program, like you could stay at UCSD or you could work at Salk or you could work at Scripps. And so kind of giving yourself that kind of flexibility could be beneficial. And then that also helps like when you interview, you'll know.
I think Francesco may be typing in the chat right now, but Francesco, let's skip you for now while you type. Anna, if you want to jump in and talk about are you good to go, Francesco? Yeah.
I guess I was just trying to answer Khalid's question maybe, because he was asking about what to do for an internship at the Buck if you're an undergrad. And I would say just reach out to whatever lab you're interested in and see if they are interested in taking undergrads. Also, there's a person working at the Buck, Greg, I forget his last name, but I can figure out his contact unless Sid or Ariel already have his email, because that guy tends to set up all of the like postbac and internships and that kind of stuff at the Buck. So there's a full-time person that's paid only to set up internships. So try and get in contact with that guy. Thanks, Sid. And then the master, I mean, compared to the PhD, would be a lot shorter, right? And the main difference typically is that during a PhD, you're given a salary, whereas if you want to join a master's program, you might have to pay to get into the program. Like Anna was saying, I think that is not the case for the Dominican program, but you're not given a salary. So you're just, you need to either get in debt or like have money squirreled away or something like that. So between the two, yeah, try to get into a PhD program. Like my personal opinion is that, I would rather like get into a program that pays me, and that's why to me the PhD is more attractive. But it is a little bit harder, and sometimes people get a master's to then get a PhD, and I mean that's what I did too. Like in Europe, it works differently. PhD are shorter; you kind of have to get a master's first, but here you can get into a PhD program straight from your undergrad. So if you can do that, I would highly recommend it. And
Yeah, and I would love to hear that question answered by a few others as well. But before we move on, Francesco, any other programs you applied to?
Yeah, actually, I did not. I'm like a very bad example. I'm like an example of what you shouldn't do. Because again, I was interested in the lab. I really wanted to join Judy's lab. I had already done my internship with her, and she already told me that she would have taken me in as a PhD student, and so I applied only to the Buck USC PhD program, knowing that if I got in, that I would have already had a position in her lab. So not really helpful there. Sorry, guys.
No worries. And last but not least, Anna.
For me, it was, yeah, I only applied for the Dominican Master Program just because I was looking for a career change. But I'm currently looking at some PhDs, but I'm actually thinking about going a different direction. I'm thinking about pharmacology or oncology. But cancer is a related to aging. So I was thinking about UCSF, Stanford, Vanderbilt, I think other schools that people mentioned.
Yeah, it was great to hear about this because I've been looking into grad school programs for so long and trying to make up my mind regarding, where to study aging and so forth. But I'm just curious, with regards to your final goals, what are you planning to do after grad school? I know that some of you have a bit more time left, and I don't know, Anna, what you plan to do now and so forth. But I'd like to also do a round of what are the plans after you graduate in the program you're in right now, or in the case of Francesco, maybe telling a bit more on how you got to work with NeuroAge.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really, it's not like I wanted to work with NeuroAge, or I didn't know that I want to work with NeuroAge from the get-go. Like my idea was to just try and stay in aging because I really, really like aging research. And I wanted to work in the Bay, in possibly in a small biotech startup, because that's kind of what's more interesting to me. Like the part that I like most about the research is the translational side. And I've always known that I wanted to do like actual drug development rather than doing the academia path. And I think that if you want to do that, you kind of have like two options, I guess, after you do your master's or your PhD, which is either join a large company, right? One of the big pharma, and there's plenty of those, like in the Bay in Boston, but also in other places around the US. Or you can try and join small startups instead, where things are moving a little bit quicker. There's maybe less of a structure, and it feels like you're still figuring things out. I think that in that way, it's probably closer to like an actual PhD or a master's student where you're kind of given a project, let's say, to work on, rather than a job where you're expected to show up, from 9 to 5, and just do the stuff that you're told. There's typically a little bit more like thinking involved. And the other thing is that, I think that like one day I might want to like found a company myself, or maybe at least be part of like the founding team of an aging startup. And if that's also what you'd like to do, again, it's probably really good to have experience in a startup that is like very, very small. So that's kind of what I was trying to get. I was trying to get a job that would allow me to work in a very, very early stage startup. And EuroAge was one of those companies. I already knew Kristin was the head of the company because she organized conferences at the Buck. And a position, opened up like, I don't know, 2-3 weeks after I started looking for a job. So I just got really lucky. Kristin already knew me. She liked me, and I ended up, getting the job that way. Yeah, if I guess the one advice that I can give out of my experience is that if you can, while you're doing your master's or your undergrad, try to like network with people, try to get to know more people that might either directly offer you a job later on, or at least people who are in the community that you're interested in joining, right? So I didn't know that Kristin would have had a job opening when at the same time that I would graduate, but I knew that she had a company. She was organizing a longevity summit at the Buck, so that I knew that she would know a lot of other companies, and I just volunteered to help during the organization of the company to have her as like a contact, right? Turns out that I even got a job with her, but that was that was maybe a little bit unusual and luckier, I guess. But even if I only had her as a contact, right, then I could have gone to her and asked her if she knew about anyone in the Bay looking for a fresh PhD graduate. And so yeah, just network as much as you can.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about what I'm planning to do after I finish, and then just one other thing, kind of about applying to PhD programs, maybe quickly. Is that the major or the concentration, I guess, that's listed on your diploma? Like for us, it would be biology of aging. I think that's less important than you would expect it to be. So, like, same as if you're applying to medical school and your undergrad degree is in biology, or if it's in chemistry, biochemistry, it could be in art, it could be in dance. It doesn't really matter as long as you have the qualifications to apply to medical school. It's the same thing with a PhD. So whether it says biochemistry or it says biology of aging, what really matters is the lab that you're working in, and the type of research that you've put out. So like you could be a biology of aging student and like Francesco worked mostly on senescence, and then like I've been working mostly with metabolism. If there was a PhD student in the Ben's lab, they'd be working on cancer. And so all of these are related to aging, but it doesn't necessarily mean that like your primary project was super aging focused. So what I mean by this is that you can apply to like UCSF's, I don't know, like a random department like computer genomics or something, right? And you could still work in a lab that's doing aging research, especially if you're interested. Really, how I would like best describe this is find the programs that have low application rates, that are at good universities, and tend to accept a large percentage of their pool, and then figure out in those programs which faculty are generally considered to be the core faculty, and then kind of the extra faculty who are like still within the department, but not by name. So they might have like a affiliation with the department, and you still might be able to be in their lab, even though they're not fully in the department. So they might be, instead of in the genetics department, they might be in biochemistry or something. And so you can still work in that lab, still get a degree from UCSF, but it's a little bit easier of a program to get into. So don't like necessarily just apply to like Tetrad, which is like their large umbrella program. Try to figure out, like, do a little bit more digging, because that's going to help you in the long run. And then in terms of, for me personally, for what I'm looking to do after I defend, I'm interested also kind of in like more translational work. And so I have kind of figured out that I don't really want to do, if I can help it, continue to do bench work. And so, I mean, I still want to do something that's really focused on moving the science forward and moving and translating a lot of the basic research into humans. And I think really that's where there's a lack in the longevity field. So, I mean, if I could really have anything I want, I would love to be able to learn how to run clinical trials. I'm in talks with trying to find a postdoc that would let me and train me to do that. So that would be my number one thing. But I think after that, I'm kind of interested in like a broad range of things. I would be fine with working as a senior scientist or something at a pharma company if they were doing something that was like aging related, like, you know, working on drug development for like semaglutide or something like that. These GLP-1 agonists are really interesting for aging. Yeah, and then I mean, I'm kind of interested in some of these like other careers that people don't always like think about, like medical writing. I find pretty interesting. And so that would be basically like analyzing all the data that goes into like a phase trial related to a pharma company or a biotech company. You would work for a CRO, contract research organization, and you would help basically write up and analyze data all day. And consulting is kind of interesting. You get to lend your kind of academic experience of creating, designing projects, but you don't necessarily have to work all the time at the bench troubleshooting things and having things not work all the time. I think I'm just sick of experiments not working. That's really what it is.
Just chiming in there, like, trust me, guys, you're gonna get sick of it by the end of your PhD. Like, I can guarantee you that even if, you know, at the beginning it's all super exciting and you want to learn, you will get tired of it. And it's not bad to keep in mind these, you know, several other options. And one of the easiest things would be to, you know, learn how to do computational stuff, because that's, you know, also something that would allow you to stay in research but not have to go to the bench and have to go do stuff during the weekend in the lab, because there's a time point that you absolutely need to do, you know. It's like, try and keep your options open just in case you do get so tired of it that you can't do it anymore by the end of your PhD. That would be my advice.
Okay,
What was the
so
original question again? I don't even remember what we were talking about.
so the original question was about plans after grad school.
Okay.
But we also have lots of questions in chat, so yeah.
I did want to add something really quick, is that there's like the one path of going straight into grad school from undergrad. There's the second path of getting a master's degree, or there's the path that I did, which was doing, you know, a couple of years working in industry or academia. I worked in as a research associate in a lab for 2 years, and I felt like that was my way of like, I didn't have the money to really do a master's. I still got a lot of the research experience, like really diving in deep and doing that in my 2 years, and that's what I tried to highlight in my applications. I didn't get like the classes or do the thesis, but I still think like those 2 years of like working and doing research is really valuable. If that's like another option people would think about.
Awesome. Julian, if you have a question, we can get you to say it out loud, and then we'll spit fire through the questions in the chat very quickly.
Absolutely, yeah, sounds good. Okay, yeah, so my question is, so first off, I'm kind of in a unique situation. So I'm a business student right now, and I'm gonna become a senior, and I find the field of longevity very interesting, and the prospect of making humans live forever and longer pretty interesting. And so with that said, I'm considering getting a baccalaureate, or however you say it, or a master's, and to kind of fill in the gaps of all the technical knowledge, since I know that I need to acquire all that technical knowledge to become successful in the field. And so I was wondering, what type of majors or degrees would you all recommend that I look into to become someone who can be a pioneer in this field of longevity?
Anyone specific? Oh, Sid, go ahead.
Yeah. I think like I guess it depends. So if you're thinking of like trying to make a difference in longevity, I don't think you necessarily need to work in research. I mean, I think there's a good amount of ways to still make like a really big difference in moving the longevity field forward, that you with skills like you might have already acquired. I mean, and if you don't want, if you really want to do research, like that's another thing. Like you can totally do that. But I think like, I mean, if you have like a business mind, then even working like at a consulting firm that's looking at longevity, like you might have like the kind of experience for that, or working at kind of like a venture capital fund. I think that's like an area that's like pretty hot right now. And I think like in terms of a venture capital fund, like really the skills are going to be learning how to do the due diligence of reading through the literature and identifying what's good research and what's bad research. So then you can figure out what kind of companies and people to invest into. And so I think, I mean, my general recommendation is to like find something that you're really interested and passionate about, because then that's going to make the biggest difference in how quickly you can move forward. So if you are really interested in like research and bench work, I mean, by all means, I think like working at a company, kind of how like Francesco was talking about, like, and how Ariel did before grad school. I think, like, personally looking back, since I went straight from undergrad, I would have gone back and worked for maybe like a year at a biotech or something, just to get more familiar with the culture around aging, the companies that are the biggest players, and then developing like technical skills. And so at a smaller company, like a smaller biotech like Francesco is working at now, like he was talking about, there's less hierarchy. So you really get the opportunity to develop independent critical thinking skills. And so I think that's really what sets you apart when you're applying to PhD programs, is showing that you can independently work on a project, and that you have really worked without just like a postdoc that's hovering over you. And so I think that's like, I mean, I think I also would have like gone back and worked at a biotech company, just like in part for the money aspect too. I would have had a 401k. That would be pretty nice. But I think just really once you're in the field, it's a lot more difficult to not find a job. And so kind of like how Francesco was talking about, once you're able to go to these conferences and really start networking with people, you're basically in. And once you have a position at a company, like, and not to jinx you or anything, Francesco, but like say like Francesco next month, like NeuroAge like folds, and they're all looking for a job. He's set, like he could find something like within the next week, because Kristen is known well, NeuroAge is known well. They're going to know that he's been working there. He's going to be able to just go, you know, meet up with some people on LinkedIn or on Twitter, just reach out and say like, oh, I'm in the Bay, you know, like I'm looking for a job. So I think like if you're looking to get into the space, what's really moving the quickest is going to be biotech, and then finding a way into that is going to be maybe like my recommendation for like moving really quickly up through things. I don't think there's anything wrong with going the traditional academic route. I mean, like I've that's been my experience. But I think like if your focus is really to like make a huge splash, make a big difference, like find something that's suited for you. If you're interested in research, go the biotech route maybe, and find a way to develop those technical skills. But if not, I think like working at something with like a more business focused, you can still make a huge difference.
Amazing. Yeah. No, dreams of a 401k. That's a real dream here as well. Okay, so very quickly, we'll just go through the chat questions. Hopefully we can get through all of them. If anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. You can ask them out loud or drop them in the chat. So to start off, Mohammed asked, and I'll paraphrase a little bit here. He asked, what exactly counts as research? Do you need to publish something to count as research? Do you need to be in a lab for it to count as research? And is there any variations is there such thing as good research and bad research?
I think the important thing to keep in mind is that usually research experience is like how many years or how much time have you spent in a lab, and that could be even, you know, when you're as an undergrad learning stuff like just learning how PCR works and following someone. I think that's still experience. I don't know if there's the only like bad research experience, though I really hesitate to say that. It's just more the focus of making sure you're understanding what you're doing. Because if you don't know what you're doing, then it's kind of like useless experience. Like understanding the technique, if you really lock that in, or even just know how the process works, that's really valuable. So I feel like any way you do research experience can be spun as a way to highlight your skills and your knowledge.
Amazing. And I mean, if anyone else has anything to add on to that, feel free to just interrupt me here.
Yeah, I think exactly what Ariel said. I would say that the reason I think that I was able to go from undergrad into grad school immediately was because I spent each summer in between undergrad working in a lab, and I had my own independent project. I wasn't working under a postdoc. I wasn't working under a grad student. And so I was always working independently and just reporting to my PI. And I think that made a big difference when I came and I interviewed and I talked about my research. I was doing this, you know, I troubleshoot this experiment by, you know, reading these papers and then developed this assay. And so really identifying that you understand what you're doing, and then you're working kind of in your own capacity. You're not just like following someone around. That's going to be the biggest thing, because you can spend 5 years in a lab just following someone around, but it's not going to really make a big difference in your critical thinking skills.
No, very valid. I do think there's a variation as to what research counts as. Just a quick follow-up on this question, but do you guys think you have to publish research for it to count as research experience, or is it just doing it is enough? Oh, I see a lot of nod no's. I think that answers the question. Okay, moving on. I'm butchering this name, so sorry. Huixian asked, how do you balance the time learning bioinformatics skills and bench skills while also reading relevant literature? So how are you balancing your work in a sense?
I think one thing to know
Sorry, I
is
missed
that
the
if you're looking
question.
at,
So I'll read it one more time. I think someone's answering, but how do you balance your time learning bioinformatics skills and bench skills while also reading relevant literature? So I guess how are you doing all of the aspects of grad school?
Go Ariel.
okay. Um, with the literature thing, is what I'm learning from my friends is like you can read the paper fully or even just kind of looking at figures and trying to craft the story from there is really valuable. So literature is the one that sort of I struggle to keep up with. And I guess the bioinformatics way is like trying to figure out a way that I can tie that into the research I'm doing now. Like I do a lot of flow, like high dimensional flow cytometry. And so that's a lot of data that I get out of that. And so I've kind of forced myself to learn how to graph in R. And so that gave me at least a little bit of experience in that way. So if there's maybe ways you can figure out how to force yourself to do the thing. We also had a bioinformatics class in our program. So I took that. So depending on what program you go to, if there's a class that will help you to get those skills, that's really valuable as well.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. Yeah, the literature thing, I think like if I were to go back, I would have made like a big Excel sheet, and then every single paper that I would read, I would put into there, so you can like identify the labs. You can like basically like sort everything by like the lab, by the field that it's in, like the keywords. I don't know, like, and then you can write your notes in there, because like the biggest thing for me is like I just look at my like citation manager and I'm like, oh my God, like when did I read this? Like how long ago was this? I don't remember what it like anything that I read in this. And so it would just be nice, I think, like going back to have started that. I mean, I guess like it's never too late, but I'm just like, oh, I don't want to go back and comb through everything now. So I think something that like Ariel turned me on to is this app called Stork, which I don't know what like the full name of it. It's got like a little icon of a stork, and it's an app where you like put in some keywords and then it will collate and deliver to your email inbox all kinds of new publications that are related to those. And so that's been great for me in terms of like staying on top of new things that are coming out. In terms of like learning bioinformatics skills and like balancing that with other things and like other projects and stuff in the lab, I mean, I would say that I really only code when I have to. I've now also like forced myself to know how to like graph in R, because there's not always going to be a lab that's going to pay for Prism, and so being able to graph in R is very helpful. It's free. And so I think like you can use ChatGPT to help you with stuff, but like getting one of those like printout cheat sheets for like ggplot2, like it's very nice. And then you have like everything right there. Just like knowing the basics and knowing how to interrogate ChatGPT to be able to write the code for you before you like fully know how to hard code everything, that can be really useful. And so like I have a lot of like proteomics stuff that I work with, and so like making the pipelines for that, that's been like kind of my experience with bioinformatics and computational biology.
That seems to be the feedback I'm getting from a lot of graduate students is I feel like you need to learn how to project manage your own research or project manage your degree. And I guess we're running out of time here, so we'll ask a few more questions very quickly. I'll ask this to Anna to start off with, but Anna, are there any conferences you recommend students attend, whether they're interested in aging or maybe just a conference you like personally?
To be honest, I haven't been to many conferences, but last year I went to the SACNAS conference. I'm not sure if it's more of like ethnic based, but it's a Society for Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science. So I am Mexican, so I think it was really great to be in a diverse environment. But there I got to talk to companies from like Big Pharma, and also Calico was there, and other like PhD programs if you are looking into that. So that's one I recommend, and it's in October this year. It's going to be in Phoenix, Arizona. So I recommend that one. I'm not sure about other ones. Yeah.
I think I just recently I'm learning about these conferences tailored towards people of diverse nature. So that's very interesting. Ariel, Francesco, Sid, other than ARDD, which is coming up in a few days, are there any conferences you guys recommend?
Cold Spring Harbor is the aging meeting is pretty good. I went 2 years ago, when I think it used to be that like 1 year was in the US, 1 year was in China, and now I don't know if they have the one in China anymore. But that was a pretty good conference. It's organized by Will Mayer. So he's at Harvard. He like is really into aging. He like worked, I think he was in Linda Partridge's lab, ton of like C. elegans stuff. And so he puts together like a really nice program. But I will say that like 2 years ago, I felt like a lot of the representation was not too different than what you would get at Bay Area aging meeting. I would say that like BAM is an amazing conference. It happens so often, so that I think it's like completely worth coming to. I would say that the ones at Berkeley and UCSF tend to be better than the ones at Stanford and Buck. even though like I'm at Buck. But I would just say like the talks are always really great. There's a real emphasis on the trainees. There's like most of the talks are trainees instead of the PIs. So you get to really hear like the up-to-date work from the people who are actually doing the work instead of like the PI who's like talking about the project that is really new and they haven't like this is the first time they've given the presentation. The slides are made by their grad student. Like they don't really know the project all that well. So I think it's nice, and then you can really network with people at BAM because like half or more than half of the people who attend are going to be from biotech. So when you go to the poster session is always huge. You can just kind of browse and walk around and network for a long time. So I mean, I think that's like, I mean, we're spoiled because we're able to access it pretty often, but it's it's not expensive to register for. It's like it's free. You get a lunch out of it. It's only a day, so it's not a ton of time out of your day.
Awesome. And Ariel and Francesco, unless you guys have another conference, a favorite conference to add, nope. Okay, good. Final wrap-up question, just to run through it and wrap up the rest of this panel. I guess with aging as a field, I believe this was asked by Paulina, but what's one thing you guys are looking forward to in the aging field? You can start with Ariel and then work our way through the list.
I'm gonna go ahead and say I'm pretty biased, but the ketone esters, because we've been doing clinical trials with them. But I do think that they're really exciting because they're a lot better than getting, especially like older people, to do like a whole diet change or something. I don't even want to do like the ketogenic diet. And so if these ketone esters, like it's really easy to kind of do the clinical trials with them. And if they really pan out to be, have a lot of benefits, and we're still kind of diving deeper into them, but that's sort of where hence why I'm here and doing this research.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also biased just because my lab is like working on the ketone esters. That's like all my basic research stuff is like giving ketone esters to the mice. So, I mean, I'm interested in them from that standpoint too. I love like all the metabolic stuff. I think like the GLP-1 agonists are super cool. I love that Lilly is going to do a big collaboration with BioAge. I think that is like a really interesting new standpoint, just because using like these apelin agonists or other you can use other compounds to prevent muscle deterioration and then still use these GLP-1 agonists or SLG2 inhibitors to really deplete fat. I think that's like so interesting from the standpoint of like frailty and sarcopenia, also like obesity and diabetes, but then just the implications for neurodegenerative diseases too. I think it'll be really fun to see over the next 5 years how this all plays out.
And Francesco?
The thing that I look for, I don't know, I guess maybe like the first FDA approved drug, because there's still nothing out there. Like, supplements are like a great way of trying to do something with what we have available now. But I think what's really going to change the field is the first FDA approved drug that comes out of one of the longevity biotech companies, that even though it's going to be for a specific indication, like fibrosis in the liver, an eye disease or whatever, it's still gonna be from like a proper or like outspokenly longevity company.
Yeah, Loyal is so cool. I mean, that's like
Loyal. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, no, that first FDA approved drug, I feel like that's the race for everyone at this point. But that's great. That's all the questions we have time for today. For everyone watching the recording, all of the participants' LinkedIn will be either in the description or somewhere nearby this video. So feel free to reach out to them, connect with them, ask any questions we didn't get a chance to ask today. I'd like to thank everyone for coming. I know Anna just had to dip out, but for now, thank you guys so much for coming and answering these questions. I'm sure it was very helpful to all of our fellows and everyone watching. And we'll wrap up the recording right here.
Cool. Thanks, y'all.